Hello and welcome back to Death and Taxes, your weekly live stream podcast from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. I am one half of your hosting duo, John Humphreys, and I'm joined, as always, by Gene Tunny. Gene, how you doing?
Very well, John. Despite all the bad news, I myself am going very well. But yeah, good to see you again, and I'm sure we'll have a great conversation. You're going well too, I understand.
Top of the world, Gene. Another beautiful day in Paris. So quite a rainy, beautiful day today, but still a good day. You said just before we started, we were talking about the news, and you mentioned, "Oh, there's good news," and then quickly said, "No, there's bad news. There's good content." I think that sums it up nicely. There's lots to talk about. Not quite what you would call good news, but there certainly is. All right, some of what we've got in front of us. We're talking tax again, but that's because other people keep talking about new taxes. So there's a few new taxes or tax changes in the offing, and one current tax that I want to rant about near the end of the episode. We're talking inflation, because how can you not? The numbers have come in again. They're higher than what you'd expect. And what does that mean for interest rates? Something unexpected. You'll hear soon. Immigration numbers. We've got the latest on where people are coming from. And if we have time, by-elections. We've got 3 by-elections coming up, so we can dive into that. Before we get into all of that, the housekeeping. So we're doing this live. This is simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, and X, wherever you are watching it. Can I please ask you now to pause? Don't pause the show. Keep the show going. Just pause your soul for a second. Give it a like. Give it a share. Send it around the algorithm. It really does help. And go and find us on all those platforms, which I should have mentioned. Actually, it's also live streamed on LinkedIn through Gene's personal channel as well. And then we put it up later on Rumble and Substack. Speaking of Substack, please go along there and follow us. That is free to be able to sign up and get our content. There is a paid version. I would love for you to join the paid version. It helps us to keep the lights on, but you get nearly all of the content on the free version anyway. But please, oztaxpayers.substack.com. Head along there and check that one out. We do take your questions as we go. Sometimes we'll put your questions up as we go. G'day, Franny. G'day, Lyndon. But often we will save up your questions, such as this one already. Lyndon, I see you this time. We'll save them up mostly for the end and see how much time we have to get through all of the questions. We'll make a priority of making sure we get to Lyndon's question on QIC. Lyndon, you may need to put the details of that question back in. My memory's not perfect about what you...
I remember it. It's about the board appointments. Peter Dutton's been appointed to the board, as has Michael, I think it's Michael Choi, who was a former Labor member. So that's what's going on. Is it jobs for the boys? I mean, basically they've given, or mates, jobs for mates. I mean, they gave one to Dutton and then they gave it to this other guy just to, maybe show some balance. So there's a question about the legitimacy of that. So I think we can tackle that one.
That'll be great. You tackle it properly, and then I'll give my defense of nepotism at the end.
Okay.
But before we dive into all of the actual issues for today, we do have another guest lined up for you. I have talked before about the problems in politics in Australia. Everyone has. Everyone's talking about the problems. And I keep coming back to one of the core issues is not the details of a policy. There's lots of policies I agree with and disagree with and can rant about until the cows come home. But it seems to me the most important missing ingredient in politics in Australia right now is courage, political courage. And it's got to the point now where I see political courage, even if wrapped in a person who I don't always agree with, I start to appreciate it because it is so lacking and so needed for us to do anything to get out of our current malaise. And our guest today is someone who is in the maelstrom of mainstream politics and while there showed courage and then getting out showed courage. We've got today George Christensen, former National Party MP, then One Nation aficionado, and citizen journalist, all-round good guy, troublemaker, bomb thrower. George, how you doing?
Very well, John. Thanks very much for having me on your show.
Certainly, anytime.
G'day, Jane.
John, were you basically implying that you don't agree with a lot of what George is saying, with what you were saying before?
I realized as I was saying it would sound like that. I think I actually agree with George on the overwhelming majority of issues. But it used to be that all I would look for is agreement. And it's got to the point, look, I think George and I overlap a lot. I think I overlap less with Pauline, but I have
I'm
come
probably
to
a little bit more populist on the economics and less libertarian purist, but on the cultural issues, a complete libertarian purist.
Well, but on Pauline, for instance, I think I'd probably disagree with her a bit more than I'd George. I have a lot of overlap with George, a lot of overlap with Corey Bernardi, probably less so with Pauline, but I've come to appreciate her much more, her role in politics, because of what she has. She's represented this sort of courage, the missing courage that so many politicians don't have, that sort of grit and willingness to walk into the lion's den and say something that'll get you hated and keep saying it no matter what. That sort of courage is underappreciated. And as I've come to appreciate it more, I guess I've slightly appreciated Pauline a bit more as the time has gone on. I assume you'd agree with a bit of that, George, that Pauline's shown that grit and courage in politics?
Oh, yeah, look, sure. I mean, anyone that's actually had to go to jail for basically wanting to create a new political movement, it's got a lot of courage. They've got it in spades. She went to jail for 3 months and then obviously got out on appeal, but it was found that, everything that was thrown at her was hogwash. And she's been pilloried through the media ever since in particular. And now even the right-wing media are having a go at her. The Australian has basically launched a sustained campaign to keep the big duopoly in power to ensure that their Liberal Party friends are not done away with. But I think actually the more and more I look, I mean, it's interesting. I know we were going to talk about politics probably last on this show, but the polls, I was even skeptical when I saw the first few polls, say the first couple of months. Holy moly, One Nation rising, bigger than the Liberals. Is this serious? Will this last? I now firmly believe it will last. And we're going to see interesting times ahead. I think Gina Rinehart is right when she says this is only the beginning, and she expects that One Nation is going to be bigger than Reform and Nigel Farage in the UK. I think that too, and I think we'll see the results of that in some of these elections coming up. Yeah,
well, we could touch on those elections quickly. I mean, normally we go to Gene's Roundup now, and don't worry, I know most of you have tuned in for Gene's Roundup, but we'll get to that in a second. But we have 3 by-elections coming up. We got the Nepean one in Victoria this weekend, then the Farrer by-election, the federal by-election, but in New South Wales the following weekend, and then Stafford, a Queensland state by-election, the following weekend. And they're all different contests, interestingly. Though one of them is, the first one there is Liberal versus One Nation. It's in Liberal area. The Liberals are probably going to win, but it's going to be interesting, especially since when the Labor-aligned independent, when they get knocked out, their votes will, and the Greens' votes will probably go put the Liberals over the line, I'd guess. But that'll be an interesting thing.
Which by-election is this, sorry, John?
Nepean.
Nepean, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hearing something different on the ground. I'm hearing One Nation is in for a very good run in that seat. But look, I'm not there and I'm not on the ground. But my intel is saying that there could be a big upset there, actually.
Well, I suspect they'll get top of the polls, but then they may struggle with the preference flows because I don't think many friendly candidates down there that'll score well. But I mean, the big one really is the Farrer by-election, where it looks like it's One Nation versus a teal that says she's not a teal. So I don't know, an eel.
Dressing in orange.
With the Liberals back in third and I think like about 16%, and the Nats have doubled their vote up from like 3 to 7%. Which good on him for that, because Matt Canavan's on the ground working hard, and I think he's a good man. But it doesn't look like either the Libs or Nats will be in the running unless something dramatic changes in the next week or two. And then with their preferences going to One Nation over the Teal Independent, it could be a good day for. Are you still involved with One Nation, George? I was going to say with your team. Can I still call them your team?
Look, I'm not a member, but I mean, I'm very much in touch with the One Nation people, and I still consider myself a supporter. I've got mixed loyalties because I'm a good friend of Matt Canavan's, and I also support him in what he is doing, and hopefully he gets to change the National Party. I think that, to be blunt, the decision to put Matt Canavan in as the leader of the National Party probably surprised even Matt Canavan. And I think it was the Hail Mary that all of the now nervous Nellies that were basically moderate or modern liberals in Akubras and RMs decided that, hey, if we're going to be basically being beaten by a populist right winger, we better put one in so that we can actually have a competition here. So it's going to be very interesting what happens. But I think you're right. Farah will be the litmus test here. The candidate's had some issues. He's a good bloke, David Farley, but he's had some issues in terms of his support for things in the past, including the Labor Party. But the Liberal Party are throwing the kitchen sink at him. Get Up are throwing the kitchen sink at him, and at One Nation. And obviously there are hundreds of thousands of dollars going into the Teals campaign. So if through all of that, through the barrage of crap that he's sustaining from the left and the right, and that One Nation is sustaining, and the mega dollars from Simon Holmes a Court and the likes that are going into the Teal, if One Nation still wins that, it tells you everything about the mood in the electorate, particularly rural and regional Australia.
Yes, I think we haven't spoken since One Nation has gone up in the polls, but I've said a few times, I think one of the important things that has changed about One Nation is bringing on people like Barnaby, yourself a bit earlier on, but then Barnaby and then Corey as well, which I think has given the party more, I hesitate to say credibility, but I figure that you could imagine in the Lodge.
Yeah.
I give Pauline a lot of credit for her courage, but and maybe this is a cruel thing to say, I just can't see her in the Lodge. It stretches credulity a bit too far for me. But
sees
Barnaby
herself in the Lodge, though. I mean, she's quite clearly a senator, and I don't think she has aspirations ever to be Prime Minister. But and the reality is, the way our system operates, she wouldn't be being in the Senate. She couldn't be constitutionally.
Well, no, she can be constitutionally. Gordon was Prime Minister
for 3 months.
And then he,
you get. I think the rule is you get 3 months, not just not in the House of Reps or not in the Parliament. You get 3 months. You can be outside of Parliament. Someone could actually be, as I understand it, elected or made Prime Minister, but the deal is they've got to get a seat in the House of Reps within 3 months of being sworn in as PM, or they're out. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong. You might have to be a senator, but once you quit the Senate, you're actually not anything. You're not a member of Parliament anymore. Anyway, 3 months is all they've got.
Yeah. Well, that you say you can be Prime Minister from outside Parliament entirely. So, George, there's still a chance for you there. But
no thanks.
My point was people like Barnaby. You could imagine him in a leadership role. I mean, he was Deputy Prime Minister of the country. He was a part of that same clique with Matt Canavan and you at one stage, wasn't he? I don't know if you still get along with him.
Definitely a bird of a feather. Yeah. And but mate, we're going to talk about it later. But after we talk about all the economic stuff, I mean, the place is a dumpster fire. Who would want to be in charge of it? I mean, the cleanup operations that are going to have to go on to get Australia on the straight and narrow are Herculean.
But that's what makes the great reputations, isn't it? So if you look at the reputation that Hawke and Keating had, and then Howard and Costello afterwards, it was each had to respond to dumpster fires or crises. Hawke and Keating responded to the malaise, I suppose, or the loss of competitiveness, through their reforms, and then Howard and Costello responded to the huge debt that, it's not it's much larger now, but at the time we thought it was a very large debt, and they responded to that, got the budget back on track, and that's what made their reputation. So I think that's what politics is about. That's what leadership's about.
Indeed.
All right, let's get into the economics, Gene. So for the people listening at home, of course, if you are normal, you're not following economics day to day. Why would you? You're normal. But you do need to know it. Instead of staying glued to the TV well, no one watches TV, the internet. You can skip it all week because on the Thursday night, you can come here, listen to Gene for 10 minutes and discover everything you needed to know about the economy. So with that said, Gene, what do we need to know?
Well, I think George has already told us it's a dumpster fire. I mean, we just had the shocker of although maybe not as much of a shock. I mean, some people were predicting 5% inflation through the year. It got up to 4.6 in the CPI. So we had the March figure come out. So that's the light blue line there. That's that big spike in CPI. Now, as we've discussed, John, I mean, the RBA will probably look through that or just say, oh, well, that's just a temporary war impact from the higher fuel prices, so we won't let that figure too much in our decision making. But what will figure in their decision making is the fact that you've got that pink line and then the dark blue line. They're the core inflation measures, the weighted median and trimmed mean measures, and they're still over 3%. There's 3.3 for I think the trim mean and 3.5 for weighted median. Over, they're persisting above the 2 to 3% target range. So there's a very good chance that the RBA will lift next week. The market is pricing it as more likely than not, so around 2/3 chance of it being lifted versus 1/3 not. I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, they may well keep it on hold and say, well, we've got the war going on. There's concerns about the economy slowing down. So it's not guaranteed. If I were the RBA, I would be lifting, because I think that otherwise there's a risk that we just lock in this persistent inflation, that it could even get worse. We end up with stagflation in the end. So I think we've really got to. They really do need to lift. But we'll see what happens. The last decision, there was a split on the board. It was 5-4 in the vote. So it looks like there's a part of the Monetary Policy Committee that doesn't want to raise rates. They're more dovish than the others. So let's just wait and see there. Okay. As I mentioned, the big part of it's the fuel, and I mean, we're all hoping that this gets resolved soon, but unfortunately it doesn't look like it. And now the market is expecting, or they're worried about future, Trump may decide to hit Iran again. So the speculation the ceasefire could be over and that there will be renewed attacks on Iran. And so that's pushed oil up in the latest trading, so to over 120 a barrel for Brent. That's still below the record high, which is around 140. But it's still, it's obviously, as we know, disrupted the global market. And there's shortages emerging of products, particularly of petrochemical products. And it's just a bit of a dumpster fire, as George mentioned. Okay. Speaking of a dumpster fire, we had the news today about Woolworths. They had they foreshadowed that their earnings are going to be down because of higher fuel costs, and also that's biting them in two ways. It's biting them through the higher input costs of freight, and it's also constraining household budgets, which means people have less to spend in the stores. And so they've had a real hit to their share price over the last 5 days. So they're down. So that's when I took that snap earlier, 9.4% over the past 5 days. So that's telling that story about this risk of a slowdown in the Australian economy. We've got a lot of prominent commentators and business people talking about that. Chris Joy had a conversation with Mark Burris the other day on his podcast, just talking about just how bad things could get. So definitely check that out. Okay, so that's the bad economic news. A piece of interesting demographic news. I mean, I suppose there's an economic angle to it. This is something that's got a lot of attention. This is from the ABS that put out their resident population by country of birth, which shows that for the first time, England is no longer the top country of people who are not born, who are born outside of Australia. The category with the country with the most people in Australia born in that country is now India. So nearly 1 million Indians or people hailing from India in Australia, which compared with 2015, I should have worn my glasses, but it looks like it's more or less doubled since 2015, while the number of people who were born in England has fallen from over 1 million to under 1 million now. And yes, this just speaks to the significant demographic change that we've had in Australia and the very high immigration that we've had in recent years, notably from India, among other places. So India is really the dominant source country now. So yep, that's got a bit of coverage. Other things I've been tracking, just speaking to the economic challenges we've got. This is one of these longer term issues, John. The issues of productivity. We're always emphasising on this channel the importance of productivity. One of the problems we've got is that we're just not training enough people in the trades, and with AIG, the Australian Industry Group, produced some figures earlier this week that showed just how significantly down apprentices and trainees are. I mean, there was a big spike during COVID. That's where you see the big surge in the numbers. But apprentices they're down on where they were, say, 10 years ago, and they've declined. Yeah, they've certainly declined from that COVID peak. And I think there's a general view that we're just not training enough people in those trades, particularly if you think about the need we have to build more houses, to build more infrastructure. We've got a real problem there. So that is, I think that's very concerning. We've just trained too many people at university rather than on the tools. Okay, so finally, I must say, I put this quote from Melinda Salento. I hadn't thought I'd ever be quoting Melinda on this show. Not that I've got anything against her. I think she's, but I just thought CETA was generally, fairly mainstream, and generally they just try not to rock the boat. But I think what she's saying here, this quote, I thought this was really good, and I thought that's I absolutely agree with that. So this came out in the CETA newsletter the other day, and I think this message is something that we should be emphasising, that re-establishing a clear consensus on what government should provide and what individuals should provide for themselves must be a priority. And absolutely, I think we've really got to sort that out. And NDIS is a case in point where we've just had these massive cost blowouts. And So well
in
done.
What context was that said, Gene? Just out of interest.
Oh, about the budget. So just about the need for restraint and all of that, and the need to actually get the economy productive again, or get productivity moving. And so yes, it's in her latest newsletter. I'll try and put a link to it somewhere if I can get into these show notes. But I thought that was a really good quote, and definitely something we should be backing. Okay, so that's.
It seems like an obvious thing to say, but that we should draw a distinction between what the government does and what we do. But Jane, I think nonetheless you are correct, because without consistently reminding ourselves of this, we can very easily fall into the trap of just every election is about the government order, every complaint is the government didn't do, every solution is the government should fix. And if you don't remind yourself sometimes that, some things aren't the government's domain, that way lies the slow water torture of Fabian socialism, step by step, inch by inch, unless you draw a line and say, actually, that doesn't belong in the government's domain. How else do you stop going that direction? So what she's saying is obvious and a truism, and almost banally obvious. but it is something that needs to be repeatedly said.
John, part of the problem is we are, despite what the media and leftists might claim, a high tax nation. And the problem with that is that when you're a high tax nation, if you take all levels of government, and of course, something that we're going to talk about, hidden taxation through inflation and what the government's doing, when you're a high tax nation, there's high expectations. And so I completely agree with what's said, but what's going to come first is government's got to do their side of the deal, lower taxes, and then there'll be less expectation because we'll have more money in our pockets.
Well, I mean, and if we also want to get productivity running, Gene, if you're not regularly watching this show, there's something we say nearly every week, and that is Australia's been in a productivity slump. The last decade, 10 years of no productivity growth. The last 3 years, average GDP per capita has been going backwards. So you're working harder, you're taking less home. The cost of living crisis is at its core a productivity crisis. And to get productivity going again, the only way is capital investment and innovation. And how do you get that going? The only way that works, there's lots of ideas that politicians throw on the table. The only ones that work are lower taxes, less regulation, and cheaper energy. So we keep going back to just hammering those three issues every time. And a part of that, as you just said, that lower taxes part, it's a lot of people interpret that as me saying, well, I earn a lot of money and I don't want to pay tax. The angle I take, maybe that's some people's reason. The angle I take is not about how do I benefit each taxpayer in their pay packet right now, but how do we get the incentives right to fix this economy so that our wages start going up? We need capital deepening. We've had capital shallowing. If you want wages to go up, there needs to be more capital per person, which means you need an incentive to invest in capital. And that means we need lower income taxes. And as you say, I mean, the problem with international tax comparisons is countries run their systems so differently. Those comparisons are often hide more than they reveal. But it's unambiguous that Australia is overly reliant on income taxes. So the counterpoint would be, yes, but we have a smaller GST. True, fine. But our income tax is one of the highest in the world. It kicks in, the high rates kick in at some of the lowest incomes. And a lot of people are paying far too much income tax, and that is holding us back. So they got to do something eventually on that.
And it's not even talked about. That's not even part of the political discussion, really. What you've just mentioned there, starting at the low ends. I mean, One Nation actually does talk about it. Probably one of the few political parties that does. But the question is, we know what the poverty line is in Australia. Why is anyone who has income below the poverty line paying tax?
Yeah, well, and the other way of looking at it is we know when people start to receive welfare. Why are people paying tax while they're receiving welfare?
Yeah,
you could just trade those two things off and stop this.
It's just a money go
round. We've got
round.
hundreds of billions of dollars of tax welfare churn in this country. Hundreds of billions.
Yep.
If you include in welfare all of the in-kind benefits that people also get, you could just give them less of those benefits, take less of their money, and a lot of people would actually the government would be no worse off, and we'd be better off. But yes,
we'd be better off because we'd be paying less bureaucrats to sit there and basically do the money go around in Canberra.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And unfortunately, the politicians have, with no disrespect, George, as a recovering politician, but they have learnt to speak the language. Like they've learnt the word productivity. They haven't learnt what it's meant, but they've learnt the word productivity. And so they say it all the time. They've learnt the words tax reform. They don't know what it means, but they've learnt the words. They've even learnt the word investment, so that every time they waste taxpayers' money, they call it an investment instead of a boondoggle. So they've got our words down, Pat. They haven't got the meaning down. And so they say tax reform, they just mean any time they want to change taxes. Tax reform to be meaningful. Like there's only been one piece of tax reform since 2000, since the GST. And that was stage 3 of the coalition's tax reform. Not even stage 1 and stage 2. That was just shuffling deck chairs. Stage 3 of the coalition's tax reform was the only piece of tax reform we have seen in this country in over a quarter of a century. Which was put off to the never quite deliberately, and then never, jettisoned by Labor. So we don't get that reform. And by the time they introduced it, it barely covered the bracket creep that had existed in the years since they announced it. So it's, but at least that's the sort of thing we should be copying. We need a stage 3 tax return at least every 2 years. And so it should have been a stage 4 and a stage 5 and a stage 6. But I'd be very curious. I'll pivot to this on the politics again. Now, I know it might be that the Liberals are just replaced by One Nation, but if that doesn't happen, do you think Angus has the gumption to actually go ahead with proper tax reform? Or is he also just going to say the words, be vague, say, I don't like tax, and then give us no details and do nothing?
If you're asking me, I would say that, one, the Liberal Party will do anything that's very popular at the moment in order to survive. So there might be tax reform. It won't be tax reform that hits people at all, and that's good in my books, to be quite blunt. I think that I have a friend who you very well know, Brian Marlowe, who says to me that what we're going to get from Angus, being a former one of the big four consultancy dudes, he'll come out with some tax cuts for some obscure industry that exports to Bangladesh or something like that, and announce that as a big tax reform, and you could be forgiven for that, but I think it's going to be tempered by the fact that they are desperate now. They are desperate to survive. So I think we will see some big tax stuff from the Liberals. The question is, they're not going to get into government. They're not going to get into government. Will those tax reform sentiments last to the point where they possibly will get into government, if they ever will again? I don't think they will, actually. I only think the Liberals are going to get into government in some super coalition in the future.
Yeah.
Well, that super coalition would require those coalition members to support lower taxes. And look, I think One Nation's on board with most of the tax talk that we do in this room. But realistically, we still need to get the LNP on board if there's going to be a grand coalition. So I still hope that, I think, in my opinion, the policy is the correct one, but the politics is right for it now. If the LNP doesn't do something interesting on economics, there is no hope for them. They're not going to outdo One Nation on immigration. They're not going to outdo One Nation on culture issues. The only place where they could politically fight would be on economics. At the time is now or never. But we'll see. We'll see which one of those they choose. It could be either. Gene, on the other issues you picked up there, the inflation one, I think you said that well, that the underlying inflation is still going over 3%, so it's getting tricky. And I wouldn't be responding to the spike in headline inflation. Because I don't think that's what the RBA should be responding to. But unfortunately, underlying inflation is still stubbornly over 3%. So it was interesting to see, though, that the markets decreased their expectation of a rate rise.
Yeah, and that's because there was an expectation initially that headline would come in around 5% or more, and when it came in at, what was it, 4.6, they go, oh, okay, not as bad as we thought. But I mean, the problem is that the core inflation is still above 3%. So look, I mean, who knows? I mean, the markets are funny. You can't always rationalize how they're thinking about things.
You two are the learned economists. I'm very skeptical about this. I mean, with the people who are out there talking about it potentially being 5, really just laying the groundwork to say, oh, well, it's not that bad. That's how it seems to me. I mean, 4.6 is bloody terrible. Above 5 is catastrophic. So when I hear those people out there saying it's going to be sky falling, and then it's only just a little bit of a crumble here or there, they can say, oh, well, it's not as bad as what we want. Is that what was going on? Or was serious players actually saying that genuinely it was going to be worse than 5%?
Yeah, look, it was market economists. It was people who work at the banks. So I wouldn't put it past. I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Chalmers was trying to do something like that. But the 5%, that was from market economists, if I recall correctly. So I don't think it's political in that regard. But yeah, I mean, that's what I wouldn't be surprised if the government were trying to do that at some stage. Yeah. But I'm not sure what Chalmers was saying about that. I just know that he'd be clever enough to do that, I suppose. Yeah,
it's very interesting when you dig into what actually has gone up, because obviously CPI is the we hear that hokey old line. It's the basket of goods. But what does it include? And within my understanding, meat and out-of-home meals were the largest contributors to food inflation in the data, and that come from Rabo. So they are talking about meat, beef and lamb. Remember, Barnaby Joyce actually got pilloried for saying we're going to have the $100 leg of lamb. Probably not far off it at the moment. 11.8% year-on-year inflation for meat prices.
Right.
That is unbelievable. And the other one, again, go back to that Bernard Salt, the demographer, that talked about how too many people were going out and having a cup of coffee and, smashed avo on toast. well, coffee prices have gone up almost 11% year on year. But these things, can I say, in a first world nation, are considered, basics. Red meat, coffee, basic foods. And that's the thing that seems to be well and truly higher than 5%. I mean, those numbers are beyond 10.
Yeah, well, thankfully, in the inflation data, the main things that have been getting more expensive, it's only shelter, food, and petrol. Nothing we need, right? Just just those three. I mean, otherwise we're fine. I mean, it's not even true that we're fine. But yes, indeed. The other thing you picked up on there, Gene, which is quite an interesting thing that's been discussed around the social medias of late, is those immigration numbers. And I think to repeat a rant we've done before, too often I think the immigration debate is just looking at only the numbers. And there's something to do there. The numbers are too high. You need to bring them down. But that's only the start of the discussion, right? So then we do need to have a more serious discussion about which people we want in the country. And then I would say that gets caught between like the Labor position saying all we care about is their skills. Do they have a diploma or not? And now Angus Taylor coming out and saying, oh, no, well, we also care about values. And then you have the radical Eng saying, no, they all need to be Anglo-Celtic or something like that. There is another position there that I believe very strongly that is none of the above. And that is culture. It's culture. And as yet, values is not the same as culture, right? So Angus Taylor has not got there yet. And I am not saying that it's race, but I do think that culture matters. And having an immigration system that is biased towards people that are already more similar to us, I think is a good thing for us and a good thing for them. I haven't yet seen that in the mix, but this discussion of where people are coming from, people kind of seeing what they want. Some people are interpreting that through the prism of values. I don't know how, because how do you tell? Everyone ticks the I'm a good guy box when they're immigrating to a country. And then some people are choosing to see this through the prism of race. But I see these things, and I think through the prism of culture, New Zealand and the UK has a pretty similar culture to us, and they seem to be the only two countries going down in those lists of late. And I'm not convinced all of the countries that are rapidly increasing on that list have a strong overlap pre-existing with our culture. So that's what concerns me. But George, you got any thoughts on any of the above?
Well, look, I think that this does become a dangerous conversation, but one that needs to be had. Why does it become dangerous? Because you mentioned it before about race. I mean, the reality is there is a tally-ho paper between race and culture. And I'm just going to be blunt here. Australia, if I use the term Anglo-Celtic, Australia is an Anglo-Celtic nation, or at least it was. That's what it was founded as. The original Australians. And when I say original Australians, people are going to set their hair on fire and say, oh, you're talking about Aboriginals, Indigenous Australians. No. They lived on a landmass. They lived on a landmass not in the nation of Australia. I mean, they had multiple different nations, tribes, but the reality is the nation of Australia was founded in 1901 that was made up of Anglo-Celtic people as the vast majority. It had their shared cultures, their shared laws, their shared wisdom and traditions. And that's what was brought to this country. And that's the nation that we are. And look, I think that if you go right up to, say, the 1990s, by and large, most people that came here were accepting of the fact that they had to meld in to the existing cultures, laws, and traditions. 1990s and beyond, something radically changed, and it's changing even more now. And we have little Chinas, little Asias, little Middle Eastern. In fact, the last time, and it was quite a number of years ago now, it'll be worse. Last time I walked down the streets of like Bankstown and those sort of areas, I thought to myself, the only thing that would stop me from thinking right now that I'm in the Middle East, because I could see cafes there with signs up saying $15 for a Turkish coffee and a smoke on the hookah. And I'm thinking to myself, man, the only thing that tells me I'm not in the Middle East right now is the first world infrastructure.
I thought you were going to say the price. I thought it would be cheaper if you went to the Middle East.
And the price. So culturally, there's a big problem because we don't want our country to become the Middle East. We don't want our suburbs to become the Middle East with those problems. And we don't want our country to become India, quite frankly. But the question is, are the people who are coming here right now, are they like the migrants of old and willing to meld themselves into our culture, the Anglo-Celtic way of life, the Anglo-Celtic traditions, the Anglo-Celtic laws that Australia was founded upon? Or are they wanting to bring their baggage here and their problems here and create their own little ghettos? And I think the reality is, for migrant enclaves that have crept up on us over several decades, you can see the proof is there. They're not melding. They are forming ghettos. We have the balkanization of Australia going on. We've certainly had it with Middle Eastern people. We've certainly got it with Chinese, and we're going to have it with Indians as well. Just when you get far too many people in from a culture and a race, but frankly, that are completely different to what is the makeup of the nation, you are going to have a problem. And that's not just an Australian experience. Have a look at what's happened in Europe. I mean, we really self-flagellate because we're white. That's quite frankly it, because this is not an issue throughout Asia. It's not an issue in Japan. It's not an issue in Malaysia. It's not an issue in China. It's not an issue in the Middle East. I mean, those countries are just considered countries for the people who actually live there, not for people of different cultures. And if those people of different cultures come in, 100%, they are required to actually be subservient to the dominant culture that is there. We don't do that in Australia. It's just crazy. And it is a one-way ticket for the nation to actually die, quite frankly.
There is a lot to unpack in there. I've got a long list of things, but given I tend to rant a lot once I get started, Gene, is there anything you wanted to sneak in before I dominate the microphone?
What I would sneak in is, I was necessarily putting those figures up as a pejorative, but because I don't think that, India is not the country where the terrorists are coming from, is it? And a lot of those Indians here will be students, so they're temporary. But I take your point. There is a large permanent Indian population now. But I'm not sure it's the Indian community where the problems are. Certainly the terrorists aren't coming from India, are they?
Well, the last terrorist attack did come from India, I'm afraid. There were Indian nationals who committed the terrorist attack at Bondi Beach. So yes, there are, because there's a sizable Islamic population and a lot of those Muslims are radicalized. But the other thing is, I don't have to be talking about, India as a place where there's a high level of violent extremism or terrorism. It's quite crass, but if you're a tourist to India, within one day, 2 at the most, you'll see people shitting in the streets. That is the culture.
Yeah. So can I'll have a go at something that you said there, Gene, a pivot on that. You are right. If the criteria is like ticking the values boxes and will you obey the laws, India probably passes that. So it passes the Angus-Taylor test. But what I've suggested here is there's multiple levels to this. Right? Do you want to discriminate at all? And then Angus Taylor's saying, well, are you willing to follow the laws? Are you willing to not be a terrorist? Are you willing to say that you're a good person? Well, you tick the I won't blow people up box on their immigration form. That's one way of looking at it. And according to that criteria, India would be fine, most of India. But there is another thing to look at. You could go one way and look at the racial issues. There is the issue of just how compatible is this to our culture? I think if you mix cultures together that aren't mixing, but if you merge them together and they merge into a new thing, that's one thing, right? That's just integration. That happens through history. That's the history of humans. But if you are bringing in all of these cultures and having them live side by side and not integrating, you are decreasing the social capital. You are decreasing the high trust environment people grow up in. You are decreasing your ability to walk around the street, run into people, and know that you can assume certain things about the groups they're involved with, the way they're bringing up the kids, the way they interact with strangers, the way the relationship with their parents, the lifestyle they live,
marriages,
the religions that they might join. And I'm not even saying any of this as their culture is bad. I mean, that's not my pitch here. It's just not mine. Right. I'm not saying that they say I do have a few things where I disagree with George on, and I'll get to them in a second. I'm not saying, your culture has forced marriages and mine is better. I don't defend my culture because it's better. I defend it because it's mine. I've said this before, my analogy with my family. It is possible other people may have a better family according to some criteria. I don't know. I haven't been in every family. But I love my family the most because they're mine. I protect my family because it's mine. I care about my family because it's mine, right? This is a sense of ownership you have about your culture, my family. That doesn't mean I hate other families. That doesn't even necessarily mean I think we're better than other families. And it's the same with culture. I'm not ripping on their culture as being inferior. I'm just saying you have too much mixing of culture without the time needed to be able to integrate them together, and you will decay the sense of community and social bonds that people naturally have when they know that they can assume certain things about their neighbors. So that's I think India is culturally different to Australia to a sufficient degree that if you actually had a community, we've got a nice community around here of a couple of hundred people who kind of all help each other, and they're all in a social network group and selling chicken eggs to each other and lending chainsaws to each other and what have you. If you take these 5,000 people around here and you suddenly put in 100,000 Indians, it would not be the same neighborhood. Not because Indians are bad people, but it just would not be the same neighborhood. I don't know if anyone could deny that. It would be a fundamentally different thing. It would be like me visiting India. And I like to visit India. I love visiting India. And I'd like to be able to visit India. And I want it to be India when I go there. And I want this area to be what this area is when I come here. So let me say, in response to George, I agree. Australia started in 1901. There were people in Australia, but Australians started in 1901. And I agree that there is a correlation between race and culture. So if I said I wanted to have a policy that discriminated on culture, it would end up sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Implicitly creating a racial bias. But I think it matters which one you're targeting. I think it fundamentally matters. Like if there's a racial imbalance in my immigration numbers, that's an accidental byproduct of a correlation that exists. I've got no problem with that. I don't feel the need to arbitrarily bring in different racial groups to hit a racial quota. But I'm not really focused on the race part. It's going to be correlated with white, fine. But there are some non-white people who mix with this culture just fine. And when that happens, those tests are the ones where you need to know which way you go. And what I'm looking at is the culture, not the race. So I agree they're correlated, but I think it does matter which one you're focused on for two reasons. One is because I think culture is the thing that matters. This little group we've got around here where I live, there are people from a few different places around here. And not everyone here is 100% Bavarian phenotype, but we understand each other, right? And it's the culture that brings us together. So firstly, I think it's true. Secondly, long-term, to win this argument, I think it would be a mistake to walk in and say, if you don't look like me and you have the wrong DNA, you're out of the discussion. So I think that's a political mistake, but it's also wrong, right? I'm not just being cynical here. I am a cultural chauvinist, not a racial chauvinist, if that makes sense.
Correct. I do.
The other thing I disagree with you a little bit is I don't think it's helpful to say Australia is Anglo-Celtic. We came from Anglo-Celtic stocks. I believe we have created our own nation. I think Australian is a thing now. American is a thing now, right? When Americans talk about, defending American culture, they don't say defending Anglo-Celtic culture, even though it came from there. Yes, it came from there, and then we built a new thing. We've had ethnogenesis, right? We've had the genesis, the creation of a new ethnicity, Australian. And I think it is Australian that we should be defending, not getting caught up on, well, exactly, which elements went into creating that Australian. Yes, a lot of Anglo-Celtic elements went into creating it. But what I care about is what it is now. And so I would prefer us to focus on the Australianness of it rather than the background. And I think America can give us a hint at that, because America does that. They rally around being American. They don't rally around being of Anglo-Celtic origin. And when we don't like how someone, I'm stealing this from Damien Costas, his article in The Australian recently. When we see behavior we don't like, we call it un-Australian. We don't call it un-Anglo-Celtic. And I think that's because we already have a sense that we are Australian. I think we should lean into that. I think for the last 20 years, we've been encouraged to lean away from that. Oh, there's no such thing as Australian. If you pretend there is, you're like a crazy kook. And we should lean into that Australians exist. Where Australians exist and we're allowed to defend the rights of Australian. We exist as a cultural group. Yes, that's had Anglo-Celtic mix in it. We've had a bunch of Greek and Italian mix. We've had a bunch of Lebanese by now mixed. We've had Vietnamese mixed by now. But we have created Australian, and we should be allowed to defend that Australian culture without being too embarrassed of ourselves. The last bit where I'll slightly disagree with you, George.
Can I agree and disagree? I agree. The problem is there would be widespread disharmony and disagreement on what constitutes Australian values. In fact, the left would go around saying that multiculturalism is an Australian value. And until the last decade or so, be outside the political elite, that is not a value of Australia.
Well, firstly, I don't care about values. I'm talking about culture. And the culture is whatever the people do when they're left alone for long enough, which is why that's why numbers do matter, right? If you just decrease the numbers of foreigners coming in here and you allowed Australians to just be Australians for a while, we will converge on a set of norms and beliefs and behaviors and values and priorities and just ways of interacting with each other and ways of living. We will converge on that. And whatever that is will be Australian. So I'm not talking about values. By the way, the idea that multicultural is our culture is an absurd contradiction. It's an oxymoron, right? I mean, it's multi of cultures. You're bringing cultures together. So what are you bringing together? They have to exist before you can bring them together, right? If you've got Indian and Chinese and French, they have to exist before they can coexist next to each other. So if multi is my culture, what are the things you're bringing together? Right? So the lefty arguments are absurd. But the one last thing I would say to quibble with your rant before, and apologies for taking the microphone too long. You asked the question, are the migrants coming in to assimilate? They're not, but I think that's the wrong focus. In my opinion, it's not the migrants' fault. It's the cultural elites that have set the incentives. The migrants followed 100%. Their incentives. When they came in 50 years ago, they didn't come in thinking, I'm going to be a good Aussie. They were given set of incentives that basically required them to integrate into Australia or go hungry and have no friends. So they integrated. And now what we've done is our cultural elite, most of them white women, have given a set of incentives for new immigrants to form ghettos and not integrate. And again, the immigrants have followed their incentives. I don't begrudge the immigrants for following their incentives. Everyone follows their incentives. The immigrants aren't the baddies in this story. The policy makers are the baddies in this story who created 100%. Incentives whereby immigrants came in and accidentally have undermined our cultural cohesion. But blame the policymakers, not the migrants, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're on a unity ticket.
All right, so a lot of love all around. So we've done a lot on that. We should. I'll get the ball rolling. So into a few other topics. Apologies, George. If you're going to try and leave after an hour, then you're going to be running out of time. But hopefully, hopefully we can entice you to stay for a bit longer.
I will stay for a while. Yeah.
The government looks like they're changing capital gains tax. Jean, you have mentioned that we've talked about it before, but I think there is something in what's being talked about now that is worth us raising in this context. Do you want to give people a rundown on what's on the books from the government?
Me? So,
have you seen what they're proposing?
Oh, they're basically indexation. They'll go back to the old system where instead of discounting the capital gain by 50%, they will what they'll do is they'll work out the capital gain based on the real value of your, or the inflation adjusted value of your property. So or your asset that you purchased 10 years ago or whatever, they would adjust it for inflation and since then, and then they'd calculate the capital gain based on what it's worth now, less what the inflation, the adjusted value with the inflation in it would be. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of debate about whether what that means, and to the if inflation's higher, then that could actually, if we're in a highly inflationary period, that could mean they get less revenue ultimately, doesn't it? So it's not necessarily going to be a huge revenue raiser for them. And the other thing that's being talked about now is restricting negative gearing to newly developed newly constructed properties. So eliminating negative gearing on established properties, on existing properties, but there's also talk that they might grandfather it, they might exempt people who've already got properties. So look, again, it might not be making much revenue for them, but yeah, it's just part of this whole intergenerational fairness agenda that they've got. So that's how they'll sell it, and we're helping first home buyers. So I think that's how they'll pitch it. We know that they're going to do something. We're just a bit unclear exactly what they're going to do. But I think definitely returning to that indexation method that we had before 99.
I'll throw to you, George, to comment on all of this if you like. Just one quick comment. There is one person in Australian politics who had been pushing for the return to the cost-based indexation method. I mean, I'm sympathetic to it with a caveat. I'll get to that later. But one person was just been saying for a while, just go back to the old method, is Jared Rennick, who has been pitching that policy for a while when no one was listening. So it's interesting that that's now the way they're going. But George, what do you make of these proposed changes coming from the government?
Well, CGT, it's an abomination. The fact that government even thinks that it has the right to take anything of what I or anyone else has built with their own hands and increase the value of it. If you've acquired something and then I don't care what it's through good luck, good management, or just hard work. If the value of whatever you've created is bigger and you sell it, that should be yours. It shouldn't be the government's. It's an affront that actually that is taxed and the winnings off the lotto aren't. That is just disgraceful, actually, when you think about that. As for death taxes, well, I can tell you the biggest proponent of death tax sits in the parliament. His name is Senator Tim Ayres. He was a big proponent of it before he became a senator. And so you'd find a lot of the Labor types are very supportive of this. I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't bet against it, though. I don't think it'll be in the budget. But I also don't think that it's long for being proposed in a future budget, particularly with Labor looking like they're going to hold the reins for at least the next election.
Now, your argument against CGT there, George, I love it, but it is very pure libertarian.
Mate, the government has no right to like about it. Quite frankly, they got no right. I find it at a moral level, the fact that we get a 50% discount, it should be a 100% discount. The government should get nothing of it.
At a moral level,
the argument for the government getting anything off? But
I can't believe you're going to do this to me. You're going to make me play devil's advocate for the pro-tax. You're going to make me play devil's advocate for the pro-tax position. But here, look, I agree with you at a moral level, right? It is immoral to take money from someone in that situation. It is equally immoral to take a cut of their pay if they have put in their labor. You own your labor. You own your body.
Income tax should not exist.
It is immoral. It's also immoral to take a cut.
It was one of the first things I said. It's in my maiden speech that I long for the day that income tax is a thing of the past. There is nothing worse than the government mooching off your hard work. It shouldn't exist. Find another way of taxing people.
I agree with that at the moral level. At the moral level, if I have a voluntary transaction and I buy a chicken from you, George, the government should not be able to just take 10% or 11% or whatever it may be of that transaction. So GST is also immoral. If I own a house, the government should not be able to show up and say, oh, you're existing on your own land. I tell you what, give me $1,000 or I'm kicking you off it. That would be immoral. Every tax is immoral because it's not voluntary. The issue is and I love those arguments. I'm all for the deontological arguments for radical libertarianism. If we relax that constraint and we decide that we're going to live in a world where not everyone is an anarcho-capitalist yet, George, like you and I, but if we're going to live in that world and we're going to accept some amount of tax, we are left with the question, even though every tax is immoral, if you just look at the actions, what sort of taxes will we have to tolerate as the least terrible? But in that context, if we're going to have an income tax, I think there is a case to be made that you just tax income because it's income. And you don't say, look, I tax income because you work and I tax that harder. But if you get income off a capital asset, I don't tax that at all. But actually, if you get income off a capital asset and you get it through interests, I tax it high. If you get it through dividends, I tax it half. If you get it through capital gains, I tax it not at all. We've got 4 different income tax systems in this country. So there's a case to be made that if it's going to exist, how about we just tax income, full stop? Right? And stop doing all of this convoluted malarkey. Now, that does require a CGT discount because CGT, unlike income tax, if I sell my labor and I'm paid on the same day, there's no inflation getting in the way. There's no time value of money. It happened that day or that week or that fortnight, right? With capital gains, that could happen over years. If you buy something at $100, you sell it at 110, you think, oh, good, I made $10. But if over the course of owning that asset, there's been 20% inflation, you've lost money. In that case, it would be incoherent to say that you should pay tax on that extra $10 when actually what happened is you lost $10. So that's why we need a capital gains tax discount of some variety. Nearly everyone agrees with some amount of capital gains discount. Probably the Greens and Australia Institute don't, but everyone serious does.
Just to add one thing, and I'm no economist, so I'm not going to do this, the justice and the argument that probably you would, but there is a difference actually between income and capital gains. Capital, when you sign up as a worker, I mean, you've got a guaranteed paycheck, right, until you get fired or until you quit. So there is a sense of security around that income. There is no sense of security around an investment. You could lose the lot. I mean, and so the reality is when you don't lose the lot, whether it's through luck, good management, or hard work, whatever it might be, you could have lost it all. So why would the government take that? And when we consider, as I said, that lottery earnings are not taxed, but this is. I mean, there's something that's just morally repugnant about that. Really, I don't know.
Well, the lottery one is an oddity, but you're right that these people are doing something reasonable where they are undertaking a cost and getting a reward because they take on a cost, which is delayed consumption and risk. And they're getting a reward for that. But keep in mind, if you expend your labor, you're also undertaking a cost. You've got to, lug.
But there's no risk.
Lug lumber back. No, but okay.
But there's no risk.
But it doesn't matter. They're both costs, right? One cost is I have to spend 8 hours of my day doing something I don't like. You with capital income,
you're going to get a guaranteed paycheck for. And
yes,
the other one is doing 8 hours a day that I don't like it as well, and I could lose the shirt off my back.
No, but so the work you get. All right, George, wait. You're conflating two things. Capital income, you don't have to do any work for. You're getting compensated for your risk. That's what the money is for, right? You're not doing any work. You sit at home, watch TV, and your capital can work for you. Like if you own shares, you don't have to go into that business. That's capital income. So the whole point is you're getting paid for taking that risk. And when I have labor income, I'm getting paid for doing work. In both instances, I think you should be able to just keep the money from using your labor, keep the money from using your capital, ideally in a moral sense. But in both instances, you are undertaking a cost. And for that cost, you are getting a reward. So
I agree with that. But let me give you another example. And this is why perhaps there needs to be a split system that you were arguing against earlier. If I bought a hot dog stand and I decided that I was going to do something special with the hot dogs, and it took off, and I ended up with 10 hot dog stands, all under the same business name, and then sold it, bought it for $10,000, sold it for $500,000. Why should government get any of that? Why?
Because you've earned an income. I mean, it's just, if there's an income tax,
I could have lost
the income is.
I could have lost the entire 10,000.
You could have, yes, but I could have also bought that business.
I employed a bunch of people. I created 9 new hot dog stands. Each of them had a worker at it, 2 workers perhaps, and they're paying tax. I contributed to the economy. I was the one who actually helped create the economy. That economy, but hot dog economy.
So do workers. I mean, without workers working 8 hours a day, you also wouldn't have the things that they're producing. So you need both, right?
That's
you need the capital, you need the labor. And I agree with that. And that's why I said at the beginning, abolish all tax. If you can't do that, abolish income tax. If you can't do that, then we have to have the conversation of what income tax looks like. And if you're going to have an income tax that raises a certain amount of revenue, if you then say half of the income isn't taxed, the other half of the income, labor income, has to be twice as high. So that's the argument for now. You've got me in a very uncomfortable position here. I don't want to be defending tax, but that's the argument. If you're going to have it, then one idea is just to have it equally treated. And the way to equally treat it, most people would consider, is this asset price indexation. My caveat on this, I've said it before, but for the benefit of first-time listeners and George, the idea under the old system and being proposed by the government is that you index the cost price of the asset you buy. So you buy it for 100. If there's been 20% inflation, then when you sell it, you pretend you bought it for 120. Right? Yeah. So then if you sell it for 120, you've made no money, you pay no tax. If you sell it for 110, you've made a loss. You can carry that forward and write that off later. If you sell it for 130, you pay tax on the 10, not the 30. Right? So that's the idea of asset-based indexation. My suggestion is, the current suggestion is you index to inflation. I think you should index to inflation plus. Right now, I say 2%. I'm not wedded to that. It could be anything, but some compensation for the fact that when you give your capital over to someone, you can't use it. What's known in the industry as the time value of money. So I think we should have indexation to inflation plus, which would be more generous. What this would mean, if inflation was running at 3% and we did the +2, that would mean anyone making a normal return on their investments. You buy shares, it's making 5% a year. You buy anything, if it's making 5% a year, my system would have no tax on that, right? The inflation +2. So if inflation was 3, +2 is 5. So what I'm saying is anyone receiving a normal return should be paying much less capital gains tax. The people who would be stung under my system is speculators who come in and in a very short amount of time turn over something and can flip it with 100% profit. Now, Now there are also good reasons why you wouldn't want to be cruel to all speculators, but realistically, the people who are investing in new capital assets and grinding out 5 and 7% return, those are the goodies of our economy. We want a system that taxes them less. Under the current system, they're still paying 50% of their tax of 50% of that income. Under my system, those people making a normal return of 5% are paying 0. And people flipping something, speculators flipping it for a 100% profit, they would be paying more under my system. So I admit there's give and take, but I think inflation plus indexation, this is an idea that I haven't yet seen outside of me ranting it in this room, but I think it's the extra idea that should be in the mix of this conversation that I think would add value to the CGT debate. Now, George, I know you want to abolish the whole thing, but that notwithstanding, what do you think of inflation plus?
Yeah, look, and the way things are going, that's going to be one hell of a discount. It really will be.
Well, the other thing that does, and this will be very important in the topic that I'm getting to in 10 minutes, but it creates an incentive for the government to keep their inflation down. Right? So we've got the potential for warped incentives in politics, where politicians can create policies where they benefit by hurting us. Right? There are systems like inflation right now. The government's coffers, the budget improves when they run bad policies that create inflation that hurts us. So when we're in pain, their budget's doing better. That is a perverse incentive. What I'm suggesting would switch that incentive, and the government then would have an incentive to make sure they're keeping inflation down. So,
and it's
maybe we need that.
interesting. I'm glad you said, you've indicated that inflation is basically caused by government. I mean, right now, Jim Chalmers is pointing the finger at everything and everyone but himself and Anthony Albanese and his government. Of course, the easy one to point to is to say, oh, well, it's the war over in Iran that's causing this problem. But quite frankly, that's bullshit. I mean, Milton Friedman said that inflation is taxation without legislation. And that is so true because, as you've alluded to, it is government that mainly causes it. If it was true that the war in Iran was the only driver of the 4.6 inflation rate that we've got, then why isn't it 4.6 in the US and the UK and in every other country that's affected by this? The reality is it's not. And, why are things like red meat, when we are a net meat exporter, caught up in this this mess at 11.6% or whatever it was increase? I mean, it just does not make sense. So I think that you're right. We've got to have a long, hard look at what the government is doing, how much they are spending. I give them a little bit of a clap. At least they're trying to cut the corners with the NDIS, but that thing is that bad. It needs to be blown up and started again in some other fashion because it is just not doing the job that there's that many complaints about the NDIS from users, and it's gobbling up that much money that it is not fit for purpose, and it's certainly not fit for the public purse either. So there are a lot of things, and we got to remember Albanese was elected. Remember that headline in the Australian: "Life will be cheaper under me." And now what have we got? Well, we've got fuel prices up. We've got grocery prices up. We've got housing prices up. We've got rental prices up. We've got insurance prices up. We've got health costs up. Everything is up. And all we hear from the government is just simple excuses. And
not wages, George. Not wages. They're not up.
Wages are not up. Wages are not up. In fact, there was this thing. Actually, I'll just pull it up. It was unbelievable to see. And we can't blame Labor fully for this because it goes over the course of the last 25 years. And I fact-checked it, and some of it was wrong, but most of it was actually true. Housing prices. Look at this. In the year 2000, it was 300 grand to buy an average house in Australia. It's now 950,000. If you're in Sydney, probably add on a couple of 100,000 for that. A 217% change. At the same time, salaries went up 114%. So that cost of housing is almost double the price of incomes going up. I mean, a cup of coffee 25 years ago, $2.50. Now over $7. A beer, and this is going to be the most outrageous thing for Australia. I mean, I remember seeing that visual capitalist graph that showed that we were, I think, the worst in the world in terms of taxation on beer and cost of a beer. $3.50 for a pint in 2000, now setting you back over $11, a 214% increase. And groceries, $80 to $350, a 338% increase, triple the cost of triple what wages grew over that time. So, something is going to give. This is a really big problem. And we see this discussion from time to time about the shrinking of the middle class. I got to say, I don't think the middle class has shrunk. I think it's gone in Australia. There's a reason why people who are on $100,000 plus incomes are going, shit, where has it all gone? Why am I on this great income on paper, but I'm not able to make ends meet? Because of all of these costs. It's unbelievable. I don't know if you tell me that the average wage is 60,000. I'll be honest, I don't know how anyone who's earning 60,000 or under in Australia is making ends meet right now. I really don't.
Not in their own house. No, I mean, that share housing, I think you'd have to do at that level. You'd have to be more than one income earner in the household. But I agree. Like, they run through the numbers. If you buy an average house with an average deposit and get an average mortgage, then your repayments on an average salary, I think, make up, was it 75 to 80%? Just your the repayments on your home loan make up like some ridiculous number, like 70% of your income.
So
and
if that's
that
the
is
case,
considered housing stress, but that's just all the averages across the country.
30%, the rule of thumb, and you guys, the economists, you know it better than me, but the is considered 30% is what healthily should be spent on housing costs. Anything more than that is housing stress. At 70% plus, that's not housing stress. That's just like having a heart attack.
Yeah.
That's
housing
that's
insanity.
crazy.
So that's a one income. They ran through it and said if you had two incomes, you'd be on about 40%. To be able to not be in housing stress, you need 3 full-time workers in a household. So I guess polygamy for the win on that one. But I mean, it certainly explains why it's been a greater difficulty having
the Muslims might be onto something, eh?
It kind of shows why there's a lot of difficulty with people having just one working parent in the household, and that obviously then holding back the ability for people to have more kids or the kind of family life that they would like to live, which is a whole other can of worms that we haven't got.
The economic mess we've got ourselves into has really done demographic damage, and that's one of the cultural damage as well. That's one way where it's forced basically women to go in the workforce. You talk about the women want choice. Women had real choice, and there was the financial freedom to actually make the real choice. I bet you a lot of women would be staying home with the kids. The reality is they can't, and the reality is that's why there's more and more pressure now on the taxpayer to cough up for child support or childcare rather. And now we're entering this era where it is going to be impossible for young people, even young couples, to own a home. Impossible. And that leads to delayed marriage, delayed children. I think culturally actually leads to a sense of not belonging. If you don't own a part of the nation that you're in, I actually think there's something that it does to you psychologically. You're less a member of that society because you actually don't have that ownership and investment. And it's not their fault. It's not their fault. That's just how it will happen. So this economic malaise that we have found ourselves in, it's going to have profound cultural significance in this country, problems that are going to be long lasting. That's why I say dumpster fire. I don't know what the way out is. That's the big problem that I have. What is the way out? And the way out is going to have to be through a lot of pain. And will the population tolerate that pain? They shouldn't really have to tolerate it because it's not their fault at the end of the day. It's the fault of the politicians that have been people like me who've held office for the past 3 or 4 decades.
You've painted a very bleak picture for us, George, there. But I mean, look, I've been saying a similar thing with the sort of economic stress people are under, I think is part of what's leading to a lot of our sort of cultural and social stress. And so part of the solution is going to have to be, and I know that people get sick of me saying it, and it sounds like such a boring word, but if we don't get productivity running again in this country, then I don't see a very easy way of actually getting the social and cultural stresses back under control. That's not enough, right? That is a necessary but not sufficient. But I worry that some of my cohort who broadly agree with my goals, but they roll their eyes every time I talk economics. I think they're underestimating the impact that our stagnant economy is having on decaying our culture and society. And can I make it even worse for you, George, while you're depressed? There is the impact that goes on from the economy to culture and society, but then that also flows through into politics. People tend to start voting more responsibly, by which I mean, broadly more right-wing, capitalist, conservative, libertarian, when they themselves take on responsibility. And the things that has people take on responsibility in their life, own a home, have a family, especially have kids, and the third one is go off to war or join the army. Now, that one's not happening very much these days, but those are the 3 trigger things that people go through that process and come out the other end. And it used to be at the age of 30 and start voting differently. Now, what we've done is we've delayed getting married. We've delayed having children. We've delayed buying a home. We've delayed, most people aren't joining the military and no one's going to war, nearly no one. So, and that's a good thing, by the way. But what that has done is we've basically delayed adulthood. And I was guilty of this, right? I mean, we've got so many people walking around who are effectively extended adolescents. And we've got these cohorts into their 30s and 40s, the quintessential angry cat lady who are still living without having taken on those responsibilities that make people a good citizen. And it's going to create more and more Greens voters, more and more Teal voters. So if the people on the right want to fix the sort of political shifts against them, they need to get people married younger, having kids younger, buying a house younger. That's not just good policy. It is good policy. It's good for them. It's good for the economy. It's good for our culture. Yep. But it'll also help the right of politics to have a voting base in the future. Because if those people don't exist, who's voting for the right?
Agreed.
All right, furious agreement. So CGT, we've got the time tricking away from us, so you guys can just decide. Lightning round, Snowy Hydro, supposed to be 2 billion, now 42 billion. Good or bad?
Oh, bad. My God, what's going on there?
Have you seen it? What's going on? Have you looked into that?
Well, wasn't there was a tunnel boring machine that got stuck? Didn't that happen at one stage? Because the rock was a lot harder than it...
Twice. The first time the rock was too soft. It was too soft, and then they got a new one, and then the rock was too hard. It's look, the interesting thing from that example, to get people up to speed, Snowy Hydro 2.0, announced by Turnbull back in, was it 2017? Someone can correct me on the dates. And the idea was $2 billion, done in 4 years, finished by 2021. We have this big, shiny infrastructure project, and then we'll all be on net zero. Now, instead of 2 billion, it's blown out to 42 billion. You know, a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. And instead of finishing in 2021, it's now scheduled to finish in 2032. And like, as ridiculous as that is, it shows the absurdity of net zero. It shows the bad forecasts of Malcolm Turnbull. Yeah. But it also, and this is a warning for some of my friends on the right who seem to think the part of the solution is to have more government development projects and government infrastructure projects. This is sometimes what happens when the government goes in with big projects that they run, right? They don't all just work out. Like, I have a vision. Everyone has a vision, how they think it's going to work. And then you hand your vision to a bureaucrat, and then you get sodomized by those bureaucrats as the project unfolds. So, sorry, Gene, for that picture in your mind.
Well, I'm not sure what you're actually suggesting there, John.
You get screwed. I say you get screwed.
Right, okay.
These projects, people sit there and they think, oh, the government needs to run this. The government needs to set up this new business, this new development project, this new infrastructure project. Okay. We talked recently about government infrastructure banks. And look, the conversation is necessary to have because there's no perfect solution. So we're going to have to go down some imperfect path. But it is worth keeping these examples in mind, right? When you say, I have this big vision of what the government can achieve doing a big development project, and people imagine that every development project is going to look like Norway's oil fields. Yeah. Sometimes they look like Norway's oil fields, and sometimes they look like Snowy Hydro. And so you got to roll that dice, and it's a scary dice. George?
Anyone that also suggests that government building big projects is a solution to just about anything, to go and just watch the series Utopia, and know that as someone who spent 12 years in Canberra, that is a near documentary. It really is.
All right, so I think time's sneaking away from us, so I'm going to skip the other couple of topics we had penciled in. We've covered by-elections at the beginning of the chat. Private health insurance is being changed. Let's talk about that next week, Gene, if we get time. Yeah. And the new bargaining initiative. There's a new digital media tax that the government's introducing, which I'd love to talk about, but time is not our friend. So I have one other thing to talk about. This is the time of the show where we talk about ATA's newsletter. So if you're not getting our newsletter yet, please go along to oztaxpayers.substack.com. You can sign up for free. We only send you one email a week so as to not inundate your inbox. And you get to be updated with what we're up to and new ideas each week, which are worth knowing. This week, I had a big rant about bracket creep. Bracket creep, the insidious hidden tax increase that happens in this country every year. Now, I want you to think about the discussion about capital gains tax. A lot of people hardly even know what that means, but they see it being discussed and debated in the media, debated in Parliament. I mean, it is a big issue. Negative gearing brought down the hopes of Bill Shorten. The idea of this gas export tax, everyone's talking and debating. It's turning into almost a barbecue stopper. These are new tax ideas. They are debated, discussed, sometimes legislated, sometimes rejected. This is how it's supposed to work if you want a multi-billion-dollar tax increase. You have to justify it. You have to debate it. You have to win the argument. You have to get it through Parliament. Except for bracket creep, which is quite literally a multi-billion-dollar tax increase that is hidden, hardly even discussed, does not have to be legislated, kicks in automatically, happens every year. A couple of billion more, a couple of billion more. I mean, this should be a scandal that there can be tax going up this much without the debate, without legislation, and with hardly even media commentary. You'll occasionally see on page 6 of The Australian, someone interviewed someone like me and I complained about it. So it's not entirely ignored, but it is quite diabolical. And this is not even a good hidden tax increase. Income taxes in this country are already far too high. They are stifling productivity, stifling investment in innovation, which stifles productivity. And as we've discussed before, the lack of productivity, not only is it making you poorer, it's the core cause of the cost of living crisis. It's also undermining our culture, our societies, and our political system. So this is not an unimportant topic. And that's the tax they're secretly increasing by billions of dollars every year. So how do they do that? If you haven't heard of bracket creep before, it allowed me to attempt to explain what's going on. We have a progressive income tax system, which means as you earn more income, as your income goes up, that extra dollar you earn, you'll have to pay a higher percentage tax on that. So the bottom tax rate, I think, is 16% at the moment. As your income goes up, then when you earn more money, you pay 30%. As your income goes up further, then you'll pay 37%. As your income goes up further, you'll pay 45%. Right? That makes sense. Right? You can debate the structure, but you understand the concept there, hopefully. Now, the idea there is if you're actually getting richer, you pay more in tax. Here's the trick. If there is inflation and all prices are going up by 10%, and then your wage goes up by 10%, you are not getting richer. That is just standing still, right? If your wages are just keeping up with prices, if there's inflation and your wage just goes up with inflation, you are not actually getting richer. You can't afford to buy a single thing extra. And that's the only point of money, is to buy things with it, right? So if you can't buy anything more, you're not any richer in real terms. But that nominal wage increase you got just to keep up with inflation, it can put you in a higher tax bracket. And the cumulative impact of that, getting pushed into higher and higher tax brackets, means you end up paying more of your income in tax. And this doesn't just happen to you, it happens to everyone that's in the income tax system. And you add that up and it adds up to billions. And so this is the insidious bracket creep tax increase, which should be a scandal. And I'm ranting right now to try and convince you that it's a scandal so that you can join me in ranting and telling your neighbors, and we'll make it into a scandal. There is a really simple solution. This is the solution that they do in the USA, in Canada, in France, in Belgium, in Netherlands, in Germany. I could keep listing countries. It's not all the countries in the world, but it's a lot of them. And that is, you index tax brackets. All right, so prices are going up, say 10%. All right, that's terrible, but just say it happens. Your wage goes up 10%, fine. And then the tax brackets go up by 10% too. And if the tax brackets go up by 10%, then if your wage is only going up due to inflation, it does not put you into a higher tax bracket. And then you don't have bracket creep. You don't have this insidious, malicious little tax increase every year. Did I say little? Big tax increase every year. So there is a simple solution to this problem. It's a terrible problem. There's a simple solution. And it has been discussed on and off in Australian politics for a long time. But I think we're potentially getting close to the point where we could get a win here. Now, we've already got a little win. The ATA has for over a year been calling for indexing tax brackets to end bracket creep. But then I've also been saying, if you're not willing to do that yet, at least report on the bracket creep in the budget papers every year. With my thinking being transparency will increase awareness. I think the only thing that allows bracket creep to continue is there's not enough awareness. If people were aware of the fact that this exists, they would be outraged. That you can be paying more tax, even if you're not earning more income, I think people would be outraged. It's unfair, it's inefficient, it's counterproductive, it's bad for it's bad for equality, it's bad for politics, quite frankly. So put it in the budget, and then every year when the media, because they don't normally understand the budget, they just write their articles based on what they're told. Every year there'd be a box in there saying, you are getting screwed by an extra $1 billion this year. We didn't pass any legislation. We didn't tell you, but this is how much you're getting screwed. Reporting that would have been a great transparency measure to increase awareness and help take that first step towards fixing this problem. Angus Taylor has come out and agreed with that now. Now, I don't know if he is doing it because I suggested it to him. I did pitch it to him. But regardless of what the reason is, I'm just going to take the credit anyway, because that's what you do in politics. But it looks like the Liberals are showing interest in that idea. One Nation is already on board with indexing tax brackets. So are several of the other minor parties. So are some of the independents. You know, some of the less insane teals are open to this idea as well. So it's an idea that is getting a coalition of people supporting it. It's got One Nation. It's got the independents. It seems to have the implicit support of Angus Taylor, the leader of the Liberal Party. If we can get the Liberals over the line there, we will have created enough critical mass that I think its time will come. Now, maybe not now because they're not in power, maybe not the next election, but if we can keep that cohort together, this is a winnable battle. And I'm not quite as negative as George. I think there's a chance that a Liberal One Nation government could form government after the next election. And if that happens, we could win this, right? This is a pie in the sky ranting point in a pub for a long time. But I think the current environment is such that it is now a winnable fight. So that is what I was ranting about in the newsletter today. That is why I was saying, please join me and help me do this. If you can contribute, if you can join the ATA, it would help to get these sort of campaigns rolling. So if you're feeling a bit wealthy or generous, please consider going to oztaxpayers.substack.com or taxpayers.org.au or the link down below in this show. Help us push this campaign along, because I think it is a campaign that is much needed and its time may have come. So, Gene and George, what do you say?
Can I jump in here, John? I mean, I think it's, fantastic. I mean, CIS has been pushing this as well. I think IPA, Adam Crichton. What's your campaign going to involve? Are you going to write that box? I mean, we could do the calculations ourselves, couldn't we? And present the box. Yeah. Oh, how many billions? Or how much you're getting ripped off? Yeah.
I often do an estimate each year. The issue is also that there's multiple different ways to calculate it. So, but those are some of the bureaucratic quibbling that is less important. If the government at least attempted to estimate it, I'd probably disagree with how they estimate it, but at least them attempting would get the conversation going. We should. I'll do my own estimates. Other people will then argue with me about those estimates, and we can have that argument. But certainly, look, a part of it has to be. There's two parts to getting any success in a political campaign. Part of it has to be just raising awareness in the public, right? If the voters don't care, there will be no votes in it. And politicians, this isn't a rip on politicians. Politicians who don't care about voters, they're called ex-politicians, right? They're called failed politicians. They're no longer there, right? So politicians have to care about what voters are getting angry about. If voters just don't care about bracket creep, it's going to be really hard to convince them to run on a policy of fixing bracket creep. So there's two things. We have to raise awareness. We have to bang the drum. We have to do shows exactly like this and go on other shows and get the word out there and go on social media and normal media if anyone still watches it. Secondly, then, once you've got some amount of public awareness and pressure, you then have to take that and pitch that to the politicians in just the right way, right? So you convince them that it's the right policy and that it's the right politics. And I think it is at the moment. We've got the pressure from One Nation, as Liberals have to look at what One Nation's doing, and One Nation's got this issue right. You got the independents have it right. Angus Taylor's already sympathetic. They've already taken on one of our previous proposals. I think it could be the right time to be able to get them over the line. So we need to get down there and make sure Matt Canavan is going on all cylinders on this issue, and then get the Liberal backbenchers and then get them over the line. So that's going to involve a bit of hand-holding and actually going down those into the corridors of power and trying to convince people. But such is the game. Maybe we'll get George to go down there and do it for us. He's probably more persuasive than I am.
But John, you've got.
Well, I don't know about that. I was actually in the place and I wasn't really persuasive with a lot of the things that I wanted to see done. But look, I think that the benefit of this will be, I mean, you could say it's aesthetics. It's not going to lead to anything. But I think you're right in that particularly journalists are very lazy. they take the government press release, they take the glossy document and they look at it. And if amongst all of that stuff, there is something negative that they can look at, they will report on it. And so having it there in black and white for the media is probably the best thing, because none of them will do their own numbers. None of them will do the digging. They will just simply look. Now, the danger is, obviously, you've said it, they can fudge the figures, come up with a number that really isn't reality through whatever clever accounting that they've got down there in Canberra. But at least it will be being discussed and therefore part of the political debate.
Yeah. Oh, and that's just the first step, right? I think there's a chance to actually get the Liberals on board with indexing, not just transparency. So transparency was the first step, but we can go further and actually get them on board. By the way, there is a good political pitch here. And that is one of the reasons politicians don't want to index tax brackets and get rid of bracket creep, is they enjoy just being able to be lazy, do nothing, and the budget falls in their lap.
Yeah.
Right? And we said before that the perverse incentives, the higher the inflation, the higher the bracket creep, the more we're all getting screwed. That's one of the reasons why you feel poorer, because you are being made poorer through higher taxes because of bracket creep. But it helps the government's budget. So if you're a politician who wants to balance the budget but make no difficult decisions, they quite enjoy that. And look, I get that instinct. But then the question comes, if Liberals are in a contest with Labor, they need to ask themselves which side would be better at being able to manage that situation, right? If you were being held to actual fiscal responsibility, if you think you're better at that, you should want bracket creep ended. Because if the Liberals would be better at actually being fiscally responsible, by ending bracket creep, you force fiscal responsibility to be much closer to the front and center of the political campaign. And if they think they can win the argument of fiscal responsibility, which I hope they can, which they should be able to if they're halfway decent, then this is in their political long-term interest. Like, I think Labor would struggle to ever balance a budget again without bracket creep. And that should be something a good Liberal government or opposition should be able to run on. So I think it's in their political interest to take away that crutch, that lazy crutch for bad fiscal managers. You should only support having a lazy crutch for bad fiscal managers if you think your side of politics are the worst fiscal managers. Otherwise, it's not in your political interest.
Yeah, I think what you're driving at, John, is, I mean, one way they can win is if they have a significant tax cutting package. I mean, sell it, it's a tax cut. I mean, because at the moment, I mean, people, they got bracket creep, indexation, it all sounds fairly technical, but you're actually talking about a tax cut, aren't you?
I'm saying two different things here. There's two different parts to this. One is when you go to the election, obviously you wrap it up as a tax cut, right? So that's the way you would say it. But I'm making the long-term point, right? I'm surprised how few politicians think about trying to win an election that's more than 6 months away, right? There is going to be an election and another election and another election. And just like I said before, if the right wing of politics understands what's good for them, they should want more people getting married young, having kids young, and buying houses, because that will make more right-wing voters. And likewise, if they understand what's good for them, they should want fiscal responsibility to be an election point every future election. Take away the lazy crutch in every future election. So I'm not talking about right now this election, every future election. If you take away the lazy crutch of avoiding fiscal difficulty, that helps whichever team is bad at fiscal management. Sorry, the lazy crutch does. Having the lazy crutch helps whichever team is bad at fiscal management. So take away the crutch, and every future election, it will be in the interest of the team that's good at fiscal management. So the long-term political interest of the Liberal Party would be to take away that lazy crutch, which is the only way Labor's ever able to balance a budget. Take that away from them. Why allow them that free kick every election?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a bit of a sweeping generalisation, isn't it? That's the only way Labor, I mean, maybe the current Labor government, but I don't think we want to necessarily, make that sweeping generalisation, because Keating brought in.
I think it was probably true for Keating as well. But look, my point is, my argument is true. If you think your side of politics is better at fiscal management, you should do what I'm saying. Now, if you think your side of government is worse at fiscal management, then you need the lazy crutch, because that's going to help you more than the other team. But if your side is already better at fiscal management, then take the crutch off the field, right? There's no benefit to your side politically to have that crutch that helps lazy fiscal managers if you are the good fiscal managers. Now, it's an open question whether the Liberal Party actually plans on being good fiscal managers. But if they were planning to be good fiscal managers, this would be a good long-term political strategy.
And just another point of clarification is I think the way that, I mean, Chalmers got those two surpluses. It wasn't bracket creep. It was actually the high commodity prices, wasn't it? And the, just all of that huge corporate income tax that was coming in.
And bracket creep.
And bracket creep. Yeah. Okay. So bracket creep and all of the high commodity prices. Yep.
I mean, we've had tens of billions of dollars of bracket creep over the last couple of decades. Yep. So without that, they would have had to be responsible decision making. Or fiscal disaster. So anyway, that is my rant for this week. That was the topic for our newsletter for this week. Go and have a look at the written words as well on our Substack. By the way, I've boosted our own Substack. George, you have a Substack as well, right? Is that nationfirst.com.au? Does that get them there, or is there another way?
That gets them there. That certainly gets them there, yes. Also, just while we're doing plugging, I took over Corey Bernardi's newsletter, confidentialdaily.com. So we're doing a lot of stuff on Australian politics and economics over at that. And contributions are welcome.
Okay. All right.
Craig Kelly, who runs the, I can't remember what the foundation that he said, the Foundation for Economic Education, I think it is actually a regular contributor to the journal, as well as Corey from time to time now too.
He'd be a little busy now, I imagine.
He is.
All right, let's get to some questions. Now, I think you might have already covered this for Lyndon, Jean at the beginning, but for those of us who weren't paying attention, what is the story about what's going on with QIC?
Okay, so there were board appointments announced. I think it was just was it the day before Anzac Day or something? It was timing that was convenient to the government to take out the trash, so to speak. And they announced that Peter Dutton was going to get a lucrative board position at QIC. I think these positions they pay over. Actually, it's over $100,000 at least, and you just have to turn up to a few meetings and read the board papers. And I mean, I suppose there are the director responsibilities, but it's not as if you're full time in that position. So yeah, there's questions about, is this just jobs for the mates? And I mean, it's a hard one.
Is that the Queensland? Sorry, just quickly, is that the Queensland
Investment Corporation? Yeah. This is the fund manager that the Queensland government owns, that manages the state government. The core of their business is managing the money that's set aside for the defined benefit super liability. So the tens of billions of dollars there, but they've also got other investments that they take on behalf of clients, and they make investments in equities, in bonds, in real estate, alternative investments. They're a huge fund manager. They must have, like, I don't know, last time I looked, it must have been about 90 billion under management. So they're a big deal. And so it's so you want really skilled people on that board. And I mean, I guess the issue with politicians is, while they've got a lot of good experience, and you can't discount that. And I mean, Dutton was clearly, he was a minister, he was opposition leader. So I don't really want to be too negative, but is he? You do have to wonder: is he the right person to be on that board? What is his experience in funds management? Is he really the right person? It's obviously a political appointment. There's no, I mean, you can't really argue it, is it? Given that the government is an LNP government, he's former LNP. Or former Liberal Party leader. It looks like a political appointment. And this Choi guy, I mean, he's obviously, I don't know a lot about Michael Choi, but he's a former Labor MP. He's been in the business community. It looks like he's obviously made friends on both sides of politics. He's probably got a reasonable CV. And I mean, who knows? He might, I don't have I can't really say I can judge whether he's suitable or not. It's possible that he was appointed at the same time as Dutton, to say, well, we're not just appointing a Liberal, we're appointing a Labor person too, so it makes it look less biased. I don't know. But I think there's a
on
real,
the head.
look, yeah. But what I would say is, well, why is the Queensland government own a funds management business in the first place, right? I can't understand that. You have this problem where you can just create jobs for mates. I mean, I've always worried about QIC. I've always worried about the risk that some future government thinks, oh, this is a good amount of money we can play with. Let's use it for our own sort of national or state priorities. So imagine the sort of thing that, if you look at, say, Jim Chalmers with values-based capitalism, I was a bit worried about where Chalmers was going with that and what he might be directing super funds to do or the future fund. Thankfully, he hasn't been, he's remained reasonably sensible. I mean, I think he's one of them, probably the more sensible members of that government. But yeah, there always is that risk when you got politicians and, large sums of money. I'm always worried about how they'll end up managing it. And that's why you want people you want people who are good financial managers in those positions rather than ex-politicians.
That's always the concern about the future fund as well, that the whole system rests on the idea that we can trust all future politicians to never decide to play silly buggers with the billions of dollars that they have quite easy access to being able to manipulate. So, if you can't trust all politicians, then who can you trust?
Yeah. Well, look, Lyndon's got some views on Michael Choi. I don't know a lot about him, but yeah.
I'll just say, look, I said before I was going to defend nepotism. Now, this probably isn't the right space for it with QIC, but I do think there's a lot that the government does that I just don't think they should be doing, right? So they probably shouldn't be in the funds management business. I don't think the state government should be running universities, quite frankly, but they do run universities. And those universities, they are quite powerful in terms of what they're putting in front of their students and as cultural players, right? They are a cultural player. And there is one side of politics that understands that, and they are quite good at stacking it out with the people who are culturally aligned with them. And it does worry me that the people on the right sometimes seem unaware that there is a game going on. There's a contest. There's a contest afoot. One side knows it and is playing it, and the other side is asleep at the wheel. And it may be necessary if politics is downstream from culture, but culture is also downstream from politics. If these institutions are going to stay in public hands, you can't have only one side playing that game. And if the LNP or the One Nation that replaces them don't wake up and realize that they need to put friendly faces in some of those institutions, I mean, the long march through the institutions has happened. It's time we start marching back. But yes, that's maybe not something I'm supposed to say aloud. Next question.
Well, that's a political point, John. I don't think it's a good public policy point or a good.
No, privatize the university privatize the university is my economics point, but to the degree that is held there. Look, I think the bureaucracy is dangerous. I think they have far more power than people realize. I think they are political actors. This idea, we've got this picture in our mind that a textbook told us that they are just empty vessels with no opinions and they just do exactly what they're told by a politician because the politician knows what they're doing and the bureaucrats obey, is utter bullshit and almost the reverse of the truth, right? You've got a politician dedicated to getting re-elected and they've got two staffers who are both university students and they're just hacks trying to work their way up, the young liberals. And then that little group of people has to go in and battle thousands of bureaucrats who have had their job for decades and have their fancy suits and briefcases full of reports, and they are fully aligned with the media. They're fully aligned with academia. And that is the contest for who's going to win the battle of ideas in that room. It's not clear to me the politician wins every one of those contests. And so if we don't start pushing back against the power of the bureaucracy, I think long-term we're screwed. And part of that has to be either, shut them down, shrink them, cut their pay. But to the degree that they exist, you got to start playing the game too. You cannot have them only controlled by people who culturally hate you. Put in friends, right? And you've got to be able to trust those friends. So I would urge parties on the right of politics to remember that unless you make sure you've stacked out the bureaucracy with your friends, they are currently your enemies. They're pretending to be your friends, but they are playing you like a schmuck. Wake up.
Well, based on some of the appointments, John, I think they've figured it out. So I don't think you have to, you have to worry about that. I think the issue is that Labor's just been in power longer, and so they've managed to install more of their friends into those positions.
There's some truth to that, but you know how I know that they have underestimated the problem, Gene, is that if they understood the problem, Gene Tunny would be the Secretary of the Treasury in Queensland. There is that is a fixable problem right there, and they have not done it. So
okay.
If you're listening, Janetsky, there's your solution right there. Topher's going on about Turnbull and politicians feathering their nests on their way out the door with Arena. That I think is following on from the Dutton feathering his nest with QIC. I believe you are, Dub. I haven't seen it. This was in reference to inflation. Gene, maybe this one's for you. Do you believe the numbers?
Yes, for the reason that a lot of the basket is services and hasn't necessarily been significantly impacted by the fuel costs yet. So yes, I mean in terms of exactly. But so I do believe the numbers. I mean we haven't seen all of that was up to March, so I don't think we probably haven't seen all of the flow through yet. So look, it could go higher yet. Just wait and see. But yeah, I believe the numbers. I don't think I wasn't looking at them and thinking, oh, that's not right. I mean, it's still a shock. It's high. Core inflation is above target. We know there's an inflation problem. Yeah, I'm not mad at the ABS or anything like that I think they seem credible.
There is an inherent difficulty in measuring inflation, and there are critics, and the critics have some decent points. For instance, if an iPhone costs $800 and then the next iPhone costs $800, but it comes with an extra gadget, they record that as deflation.
Yes.
Right. They record that as $800 for something that's better, even if that better thing is not something you need or it's something that everyone has adjusted their expectations to. So that can feel like can be misleading. The truth is, though, you also can't not adjust it at all, because as things do improve, you have to classify them as something better. And that just creates an inherent difficulty where they may be wrong. They may have underestimated it, but I don't think it's necessarily malicious. It's just a very tricky thing to try and calculate properly. But keep in mind, one of the reasons it's going to feel worse than it is the issue we talked about just before, bracket creep. Right, prices go up, your wage goes up. These prices, though, feel worse because your wages actually, as a percentage of your wage, you're paying more in tax, even though you're not any wealthier. So your life will feel more difficult. And many people aren't having their wages go up in line with the prices anyway, in which case you are just working harder to get poorer and then paying more tax on top of it, which is a real kick in the guts. All right. From Taylor P. Australia needs a leader who doesn't give a flying hoot. Good. People were worried I was swearing too much last week, so flying hoot is a much nicer way of saying it about a second term.
Yes.
That's true. I think one of the great virtues of Matt Canavan was that he was willing to just go to the backbench so he could keep saying what he thought.
Yeah.
I think we need more people who are willing to do that. So for PMs, they've got to just be willing to not worry about their second term. But for more politicians, they've got to, at some stage, this is always the line. You're working your way up through the hackosphere. And it's always, if I just, sell out or carve off or stay quiet a bit longer, I could get to the next step, right? I could get that job in the politician's office. I could get pre-selection. I could get pre-selected to a safe seat. I could be a backbencher. I could then get on this committee. I could get in the outer ministry. I could get in the inner ministry. I could get a important ministry. Like every step, there's always something else that is another excuse to just shut up, sell out, bide your time. At some point, if you went there for a reason, at some point you've got to just say, well, now I'm going to do what I came here to do. And to his credit, Matt did that. He could have stayed on the front bench, but he wanted to be able to speak freely. And I think I'd love to see more people do that. To get into Parliament.
But George, you must know this. I mean, this is. Oh, sorry, I was just thinking. This is fundamentally the nature of politics. To get up or to get ahead, you need to do deals, don't you? And as soon as you're doing deals, you compromise. It's like
100%.
Wotan in the Ring Cycle, in Wagner's Ring Cycle. It's a story about how you have to do all of these deals to sort of, build your kingdom, and then you're compromised, and then suddenly you owe the giant. So this is the problem that we've got,
without a doubt. And a lot of people that are unwilling to do that get up and actually say the hard things in party room or on the Labor side caucus. They get a big red stamp on their file that says NTBP, never to be promoted. That comes up a lot. And what's worse is I used to be one of those people that would get up and just say how it is. I told Morrison to his face how bad he was handling COVID, and everyone sort of sat there very nervous. And then as I walked out of the party room, there were people who looked around and then patted me on the back and said, "Oh, good on you, mate. Someone needed to say it." I get angry at those people, actually, because they are the people who cut deals and don't want to speak up and all the rest of it. And there's an old saying that, sow a thought, reap an action, sow an action, reap a habit, sow a habit, reap a character, and sow a character, reap a destiny. And those people who think that they can go into politics and stay mum, not rock the boat, not do anything, and I'll just get into the position that I need to get into, and then all will be revealed, and then I'll do everything that's right and pure and good and true. But the problem is that they've sowed their own destiny. By the time they get there, they're complete and utter sellouts, and they actually believe all of the bullshit they've told themselves beforehand, and they don't do anything when they reach that top job. So kudos to Canavan. He's been put into that role, I firmly believe, by people that actually don't like him, that don't like what he stands for in the National Party, but they are now desperately worried about their positions themselves.
Yeah.
And, One Nation actually taking their seats, and they see Matt Canavan rightly as the best hope of being a bulwark against that potential incursion by One Nation. And so hopefully, he stays there and he plays a pivotal role in the next Conservative government, however that is made up.
Well, hopefully he's elected. That's not obvious on current polling.
He'll go to Michelle Landry's seat, won't he? I mean,
I think that Blind Freddie can see that.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Michelle Landry, she's had, it's been 4 terms, probably been 4 terms too many. I'm being very uncharitable there, but look, I won't say too much apart from the fact that there are MPs that actually do things, and then there are MPs that swan around at, scone and tea events in their electorate and think they're a local celebrity. And you can probably guess which side of the ledger I think that that particular MP is. So Matt Canavan going in as the member for Capricornia would be a lay-down misère for him. It would be a vast improvement for the representation of that seat, and it'd be a vast improvement in the body politic of Australia.
It's not obvious to me that wouldn't be a One Nation target, unless they were willing to step aside for Matt. That might be tricky, right? The second spot in the Senate might be tricky given current polling, and every national seat in Queensland and New South Wales looks like it is on the chopping block. So it'll be interesting. Like, I hope he stays in because he's a good man. Can I just say, in slight defense of politicians, like, you're dealing with a diversity of humans. You're going to have to make deals sometimes, right? You can't just show up as the new kid on the block, say, I'm the dictator, everyone fall in line. You're going to have to make some sort of compromises. My concern is that the rationale for that, there is always something else you can hold out for. If you went in there to do something, then eventually you have to say, look, okay, I've got somewhere, I've got a microphone, I can go without the next ministry. I could go without being PM. Or as Taylor says here, I could go without a second term, right? Eventually you have to say, all right, I made the compromises to get here. Now I'm here. Now I'll do it. I'll actually speak up. And making some compromises early on to get there, I can understand. Never actually pulling the trigger on what you went there to do seems like it was all a waste, right? It was all for nothing, except the scones and tea, which I'm sure are lovely. Anna is not a big fan of One Nation. They are an LNP satellite. She does not mean that as a compliment, by the way. Farage in the UK is a Tory. Rupert Lowe is the Conservative, and he's about mass deportations.
But
this is an interesting point.
Yeah, I just can't understand how One Nation's an LNP satellite. I mean, Pauline's essentially, I mean, her whole thing is, we've got legitimate, or we've got policies that are doing something, whereas the Liberals have been pulling their punches. Isn't that what she's been saying? I mean, she doesn't seem like an LNP satellite to me.
Well, I know what the criticism is here, and look, I have some sympathy for it, but some being the operative word here. You know, we're purists, probably including those people who are listening, right? I'm a purist in terms of my beliefs to an extent. But when, we've got to realize as purists that any political movement, if it is to capture the majority, and we actually go from being, a debating society or a fringe group to being mainstream, that there has to be some form of compromise, right? There just has to be, to capture people who would not otherwise vote for him. And that's what Reform has done, and that's what One Nation potentially is going to have to do. I'm not going to like that. I'm going to swallow it. The question is that I have for Anna and others out there, the question is electing One Nation to office actually putting us in the right direction or putting us in the wrong direction from our point of view? Is for those who hold real genuine conservative / libertarian / right-wing populist beliefs in the UK, is putting Farage in 10 Downing Street, is that trending in the right direction for our beliefs or trending in the wrong direction? And probably we shouldn't even say for our beliefs, because we believe what we believe, because we believe that it's going to be for the good of the nation. So that's the question. Is it going to be for the good of the nation and in that general direction? Might not be where we want it exactly to be, but I guess say at the moment, we start at 0, we want to be at 10. Is it even going to get it to 3? Is it going to get it to 4? Is it going to get it to 5? Well, if it is, it's better than staying at 0. It's actually better than having Anthony Albanese and his cohorts hold the keys to the Lodge and Canberra for the next decade and having it in the negatives, which is where it will be.
Anna has responded to Eugene. As I say, she's listened to parliamentary radio for a decade and heard One Nation voting with the LNP on ways to enslave us.
I must have missed that. I mean, anyway, but...
you may be right. I was just putting up her comment. Right?
Interesting impression,
And I see another comment from there. I mean, look, that you haven't put up on screen. There are a lot of, it's interesting, Reform's putting up a lot of Muslim candidates or candidates from Muslim ancestry. And look, that's a very weird thing for them to be doing, I got to say. I don't understand what's behind that. But look, I would just say that, is it going to trend in the right direction? And I'm not sitting here defending Reform. If I was in the UK, I'd probably vote for Lowe's outfit and Restore above Reform, but actually I'd probably be a bit concerned about doing that because they have a first past the post system. And the question is what I would love to see actually is getting them all back under the same tent. I don't know how that can happen. It's probably not possible, but I'm not worried about the UK. It's not my country. I'm worried about Australia. And yes, if One Nation or whoever started to sell out and there was a more pure outfit, I'd probably vote for the pure outfit first, and then I'd vote for One Nation second, because it's who's closest to the pitch and going to get the country moving in the right direction.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments on this one. Firstly, I think the great virtue of One Nation here, if you are disappointed with how they're trending, you could say, like George is saying, at least it's a step in the right direction. The other important role they play here, I would say the more important role, is blowing up the establishment. Right? Once the establishment is blown up, it is an unwritten story what comes next. Like I think I'm one of the few people that are saying that I think there is a chance that One Nation could destroy the Liberals, then destroy themselves, and something will come into that vacuum. It's not just going to be Labor and the Greens, right? Something is going to be in that vacuum. It may not be One Nation, but it can't be anyone until you've overturned the apple cart, so to speak, until you've ruffled enough feathers, until you've trumped the system, to use Donald Trump as a verb, right? And once you've had that disruptor, then a lot of more people can start playing on that field, but you need the disruptor first. So I think that is the virtue of One Nation in this current political moment. It is interesting to see that in the UK, you had the Farage figure, and then you've seen people get disillusioned with Farage's perceived moderation. As you say, the UK is a first past the post system, so it could actually be quite an important thing that's playing out there with those two right-wing parties. The US is seeing something similar, with Trump being the Farage figure, Farage being the Trump figure. And now you're seeing this split on the right. I don't know what you'd call the other side, the Tucker, the Massey, whoever it is, Marjorie Taylor Greene. That is splitting with some people wanting to see it go in a different direction and maybe stay more pure. And
that's me.
Australia seems to track 5 or 10 years behind these trends, right? I mean, our One Nation moment now, it's happening in the last 6 months. It was happening in the UK for 5 years. It's been happening in the US for 10 years, right? So we're tracking behind those countries in terms of this. Could it be that we also then end up having a Tucker Carlson figure or a Rupert Lowe figure in Australia? It seems to me that is quite believable, but perhaps since we're always running behind those other countries, perhaps we're not there yet. I do find it really interesting to just brainstorm about who that person could be, right? If the Liberals are destroyed and One Nation trips over their shoelaces, who swoops in? Interesting to note that George Christensen is currently not a member of a political party, and so is available to swoop in if the situation arises.
I'm going to tell you who should swoop in, and it's not George Christensen. I sit and read everything that Matt Barry says. Matt Barry, if he decided to throw his lot in with a political outfit, I think would be incredibly popular. You know who I'm talking about? He's a bit of a
freelancer guy.
A bit of a hidden talent there, but he's got the right views. He's a straight shooter. He probably swears a little bit too much for some people, but he's my kind of guy.
Now he was awarded the Libertarian of the Year at a Friedman conference several years ago, where he was a keynote speaker. So yes, it could be interesting. Anyway, we don't know who that's going to be yet, but keep an eye out for that, because something could change. And we do have preferential voting. So like George says, you can have the best of both worlds. Next one up, economics means we can find a way to justify the Trojan horse of immigration. I agree and disagree. It can be used like that. It certainly can. I don't think it can be used like that honestly, though. I don't see there's a particularly good argument for saying that the way we improve your well-being. Remember that the goal of economics is to improve your well-being, not to increase a GDP graph. That's just a graph, right? And GDP doesn't even measure well-being. It measures how many tanks you could theoretically build in World War III, but it doesn't measure well-being. So people sometimes get so caught up in these graphs that are supposed to represent something that they lose sight of the thing that's supposed to be represented. And I don't think you see a particularly good correlation between high immigration and a better quality of life for the people in the country. So I think economics could be misused that way, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't want to become economically illiterate just because some other people are bad economists. So it just means we should become better economists and win the argument. Giant productivity drain is in the state of our roads, the way they are policed, and poor driving. Worded another way, slightly more expansively, it's in the decay of our infrastructure, or the fact that our infrastructure has not kept up with the massive influx in new people. So that means we've had capital shallowing, we've had infrastructure shallowing, and one part of that is roads.
I think they're actually...
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think there actually has been a decline in driving ability or quality since COVID, hasn't there, too? I think that's been noticeable.
That would be interesting to look at. I mean, the most obvious thing there, and it'll sound cliche and tacky and a bit racist, but could that just be that we've imported a few million people from a different driving culture?
Well, it could be, because I think there's been some concern about the checks that are done, aren't there? I mean, are we actually allowing people to drive or ride scooters and they don't have they probably wouldn't pass a driving test here in Australia if they took it. So that could be an issue.
Good. I think we worry about that too much. In terms of policing, I think the problem there is that the cops are just there to raise money. They're go and arrest a rapist instead of hassling me for going 7 kilometers over the speed limit. But, you know, they got their priorities, I guess.
Okay.
Pre-mass migration, a theory of why high taxing welfare states like Sweden and Denmark worked was due to homogenous communities, which is claimed to build trust, which is critical for their model to work, a social contract which was understood by all. Well, I don't know. George, do you want to have a fly at this?
Man,
you dozed out. I'll take it.
Yeah, no, I think that look, goes back to what you were saying earlier. You know, when you bring a whole heap of people, particularly with family migration, right? We've got that in this country, and that has added to the enclave sort of mentality that is in a lot of migrant communities. I think that actually it does lead to more costs for the taxpayer. It does lead to higher taxing welfare states. And that goes against what this person's saying here, but I get what they're saying, that they had a high taxing welfare state and they all were homogenous. They all considered themselves Swedes or Danes or whatever it might be, and it was fine. But now it's being used and abused by a whole heap of other people who are just turning up and suddenly jumping on welfare. I guess that the same is in Australia. I mean, I heard some remarks earlier from you, John, about, and I forget what it was, it might have even been off air. We were talking about some proposed cut that would have been of something that was beneficial to the elderly. What was that about?
Oh, the private health insurance rebate.
Right. Well,
which is currently it's higher for the elderly, and Labor's looking to bring that into line with everyone else.
Yeah. See, I am less inclined to take things away from the elderly, because my view is, I believe it's born in fact. I mean, these people paid taxes their whole life, and if you go back historically, the tax system was in place partly to fund your pension. You know, it's not that case now, but that was the original deal that the Australian government had with the Australian people. And so, you know, but now when you've got a whole heap of people who even hate Australia, hate what we stand for here, and we find that our taxes are actually paying for a whole host of welfare there, yes, that social contract does get broken.
I think this goes a little bit to what you said before about the buy-in, right? I mean, if people are bought into a culture and its system and its structures that are built out of that culture, they feel invested in treating those structures with some amount of respect. If you've got no buy-in, if you show up to a country and then once you show up there, you're subsidized to not have any buy-in, which is our multicultural departments, and you're told, oh, there's a scheme and here's how you take advantage of it. Why wouldn't you? I mean, again, I'm not even particularly blaming the people, but it's going to be the nature of the incentives. And I think there is some evidence for the reason the Scandinavian welfare systems worked better is there was a degree of cultural homogeneity. Yes, racial homogeneity too, but I don't think that's what caused the bonds between people. I think cultural homogeneity causes the love you have for those people. And I think that actually led to a high trust society where people were less likely to rort the system. You undermine the high trust society, you get a low trust society. I mean, that shouldn't be revolutionary, really. The one thing on the example there of the tax being for pensions, the problem we have for that, just politically speaking, is when it was introduced, the pensions were paid out straight away to people who had not paid tax into the system their whole life. We created a Ponzi scheme, right? You didn't pay tax in for your pensions. You paid tax for the people who are getting pensions right now. So there was a whole cohort of our community who received the pensions without paying the tax in. And then we just rolled that forward with an aging population. At some stage, it will simply not be sustainable. And it all started because that first cohort got the pensions without paying their tax in. And so it creates a terrible situation where somebody is going to have to get screwed. I mean, there's just no way to make the maths add up any other way. At some stage, if you start the system with some people getting the handout without paying the tax, at some stage, there's going to be someone who paid the tax without getting as much of the handout. Or I guess we invent a new type of maths. So it is a tricky one, because I can't imagine anyone getting elected saying that they're going to be unsympathetic to the elderly. But I can't see a way out of maths, unfortunately. This is when we were talking about culture and immigration. By the Marxist definition, Japan is a nation of 125 million racists. Look, to be fair, Japan is a pretty bloody racist country, so it might be true. But yeah, look, I think most... I'm going to get in trouble for this. The reason racism has made sense in the past, in my opinion, is that it has been a pretty good proxy for culture. You look at someone as they're walking past, and you, by looking at them, can't see what religion they are, the relationship with their parents, how they bring up their kids, how they get along with their neighbors, the sort of instincts and community groups they join. You can see their race. But at some stage in the history, that race was a very good proxy for all those other things. I was in China many years ago, and I was in a small town by China standards, so a few million people, and it had very few people who could speak English, and I was facing a problem of some sort, and I needed to find an English speaker. And on my side of the road, there was about 20 Chinese people. On the other side of the road, there was 2 people total, but one of them was white. I needed to find an English speaker. Should I cross the road? Obviously, right? I mean, if you say you're racially blind, well, there's 20 people on my side of the road, so that's bigger than the number 2. So surely there's more English speakers on my side of the road. Or I could notice that there's a physical thing about that person that gave me a hint as to something about their behavior. So I crossed the road, and the guy did speak English, and I solved my problem. But look, I can understand why people then use race as a proxy for culture. I think the important thing to note is that it is not the race that actually matters, though. In my opinion, I had long arguments with a bunch of fascists about this, and they disagree with me, obviously. And so I didn't convince them yet. But it is my opinion that the race, the DNA is not the thing that matters. It's not the genetics that matters. It is the culture. But I understand there can be a correlation. So yeah, Japan is racist. Governments also like to buy votes with minor bracket creep adjustments. Well, this is true. Yeah. Another reason they don't want to do it is they want to be able to occasionally... and it doesn't even have to be giving you it back as small tax cuts. It could be giving you it back as little handouts. They basically just get a couple of $1 billion of free money each year. Right. So if they're not, they could use that to pay down the deficit, and they can say, look what I've done. I'm so responsible. Or they could use it to, give you a new handout, or introduce a new government program, and they get to say, look, I'm so generous. Or they give it back to you as a tax cut that partly makes up for the tax increase. And they get to say, look, I'm a tax cutter. And it's all bullshit. So take away their ability to do that bullshit, and the independently higher quality person will win the election, because they will have to run on their actual qualities as a person without being able to run on this lazy trick that they currently run on.
Yeah. And, guys, I'm going to have to love you and leave you. I'm sorry, because we've been having a very good detailed discussion.
We're wrapping it up now anyway. This is the last one. Just RW saying CPI is based on all the cheap products and they don't go up in price. So yeah, this goes back to what we said before about CPI is hard to measure accurately. That is true, but it's also, there's no silver bullet to that. With that said, thank you to everyone who has put in a question. And thank you, Gene and George, for sticking with us. We've gone over 2 hours yet again. Gene, we will get there eventually, break that 2-hour barrier in the other direction. At the end, what we normally do, George, is we just throw around to you guys to say anything interesting, informative, fun, or any sort of parting comments that you wanted to make about what we've discussed today. George, anything you've taken away from these 2 hours?
It's the economy, stupid.
It is the economy, and I am stupid. Gene, what is your wrap up? What have you taken from these 2 hours?
Yes, I mean, just the discussion we've had about immigration, I think it's the big debate we're having in Australia at the moment. And I mean, clearly the numbers have been too high, and then there's the issue of how do we make sure that the people coming into the country are, that they aren't going to do harm to existing people, and they aren't going to, we've got the right values. So that's a challenging conversation to have. And so I think having that conversation with you and George has given me a lot to think about. So yeah, I think it's a good conversation.
Excellent, thank you, and thank you too. We've just tipped over the 10,000 people mark who've ducked in to watch us at some stage in this episode. So thank you to everyone who stuck with us. And we do this every Thursday evening at 8 p.m. We do this live streamed on Facebook, the YouTubes, and X. And you'll also find us on Rumble and Substack and LinkedIn as well. I keep forgetting LinkedIn. It goes to Gene's LinkedIn. So please go around, find us on those platforms, give us a like, give us a follow, share this video out. It really does help. It also helps if you check out the ATA website, the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. It allows us to put this on taxpayers.org.au and Oz Taxpayers, AUS taxpayers.substack.com. Go along there, check out our campaigns. If you like what we're doing, please consider making a donation or becoming a member. Ideally, you can do it for a couple of dollars a month, and it helps us to keep the lights on. So with that said, thank you everyone for joining us. Hope to see you next week. Until then, stay happy and stay free.